The sunlight filtered softly through the blinds of a small apartment kitchen as Mason Carter, a 34-year-old single father, stood over a cracked counter pouring cereal into two mismatched bowls. His 6-year-old daughter Zoe sat at the table humming a tune from her favorite cartoon, her tiny legs swinging beneath the chair. Mason smiled faintly, though exhaustion clung to him like a second skin. He had worked the night shift again, another 12 hours at the auto repair shop, covered in grease and oil just to make ends meet. Every morning was the same, rushing between breakfast, school drop-offs, and a life that never seemed to slow down. But that morning, as Zoe chattered about her art project, something unexpected was about to change Mason's entire life. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and love showing up when you least expect it, then please take a second to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal, because today's story will remind you that miracles sometimes come dressed in everyday moments. Mason never believed in love anymore. His ex-wife had walked out when Zoe was only a year old, leaving behind a note and a wedding ring on the kitchen counter. Since then, his heart had been on lockdown, guarded, tired, and focused solely on raising his little girl. So when his best friend Jake called him that Friday afternoon and said, "Bro, I need a huge favor. You've got to go on this blind date for me," Mason laughed it off. "Jake, you're out of your mind. I don't do dates, especially not blind ones," but Jake insisted. He had double-booked himself, an important meeting and a favor to a mutual friend who had set him up with a woman he hadn't met yet. "Come on, Mason, just go in my place. She doesn't even know what I look like. I'll owe you big time." Against his better judgment, Mason finally agreed. He didn't have a suit, so he borrowed Jake's. It was a little too tight around the shoulders, but it made him feel like someone who wasn't just a tired mechanic for once. Zoe giggled as he buttoned the jacket. "Daddy, you look like a movie star," she said, clapping her hands. By the time he reached the small Italian restaurant downtown, his nerves were frayed. He almost turned back twice. The place looked fancy. Polished glass doors, warm lighting, and the soft sound of piano music drifting from inside. Mason adjusted his tie, took a deep breath, and stepped through the door. That's when he saw her. Sitting by the window, a woman in a cream-colored dress glanced up from her phone. Her dark hair fell neatly over one shoulder, and her presence seemed to light up the space around her. She looked confident, elegant, yet something in her eyes felt familiar, lonely maybe. Mason's breath caught for a second. He had no idea that the woman sitting there was none other than Ava Sinclair, the CEO of Sinclair Tech Industries. A woman known in the city for her wealth, brilliance, and rumored coldness. He didn't know who she was, of course. To him, she was just the woman he was supposed to meet for dinner. A stranger who, somehow, made his heart skip like it hadn't in years. Ava glanced up as Mason approached. "Jakey," she asked, smiling politely. Mason froze. "Oh, yeah, that's me," he replied awkwardly, instantly feeling guilty for lying. But something about her warm expression kept him from backing out. He sat down, trying his best not to look like a man wildly out of place among polished silverware and imported wine. As the evening unfolded, Ava noticed how different Jakey seemed from the men she usually met. He didn't try to impress her with money or charm. Instead, he listened. He talked about life, about raising a daughter, about small joys, ice cream after school, bedtime stories, laughter after hard days. Ava found herself laughing more than she had in months. His eyes carried sincerity, something she hadn't seen in anyone in years. When Mason accidentally mentioned Zoe, he froze, realizing he'd slipped. "Your daughter?" Ava asked gently. Mason sighed and nodded. "Yeah, sorry, I probably sound ridiculous. I'm not really great at this kind of thing. She's my world." Ava smiled softly. "You sound like a good father," she said, her voice unusually tender. By the end of the night, when Ava offered to walk him out, the sky had turned deep gold. As they stood outside beneath the streetlight, a soft breeze played between them. "Thank you for tonight," she said quietly. "It's been different." Mason smiled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Different good or different bad?" Ava laughed, a sound that felt like sunlight. "Different good." They didn't exchange numbers. They didn't make promises. But as Mason drove home that night, something inside him shifted. He couldn't stop replaying her smile. The next morning, life returned to normal. He dropped Zoe at school, fixed engines, and tried to forget the woman in the cream dress. But fate had other plans. 3 days later, a black SUV pulled up outside his garage. Out stepped Ava Sinclair herself. Mason nearly dropped a wrench in shock. She looked completely out of place among the grease and noise, yet her gaze found him instantly. "I owe you an apology," she said, walking up to him. "You're not Jake, are you?" Mason's heart sank. "No, Mom. I didn't mean to lie. My friend—" "I know," she interrupted gently. "I met the real Jake this morning. He told me everything." Her expression softened. "But I'm glad he did, because I wouldn't have met you otherwise." That day marked the beginning of something neither of them expected. Ava started dropping by the shop every so often, sometimes with coffee, sometimes just to talk. She was drawn to Mason's humility, to the way he looked at life through the lens of gratitude instead of bitterness. Mason, in turn, saw a different side of Ava. Beyond the polished CEO image, she was thoughtful, kind, and surprisingly lonely. Weeks passed. Mason found himself smiling more. Zoe adored Ava, calling her Miss A. They'd sit together painting old boxes in bright colors while Mason watched, his heart swelling with a feeling he hadn't let himself feel in years. Hope. But love, as always, never comes without trials. One afternoon, Mason overheard a conversation between two clients at the shop. "You hear about that Ava Sinclair? She's dating some mechanic. It's all over the business circle. People are saying she's lost her mind." When Ava arrived that evening, Mason was quiet. "You don't have to come here anymore," he said flatly. "People are talking. You don't deserve that." Ava frowned. "Mason, do you care what people think?" He sighed. "I care about you, and I don't want you to lose everything you worked for just because of someone like me." Ava stepped closer. "Someone like you? Mason, you're the most genuine man I've ever met. You fix things for a living, but somehow you fixed something in me I didn't even know was broken." He looked at her then, eyes glistening. "And what if I can't give you the kind of life you deserve?" Ava smiled faintly. "Then we'll build one that we both deserve." But the pressure kept growing. Paparazzi photos leaked online. Articles labeled Mason, the mechanic who caught a billionaire. It became unbearable. Mason stopped answering her calls for a week, convinced that walking away was the only way to protect her. Ava, heartbroken, visited one last time. Zoe ran into her arms crying, "Don't go, Miss A." That moment shattered her resolve. Ava turned to Mason, her voice trembling. "If you walk away now, do it because you don't love me, not because of what they say." He looked at her, tears streaming silently down his face. "I do love you," he whispered, "more than I should." Ava stepped closer, took his oil-stained hand and said, "Then stop start living." They stood there for a long time, two worlds colliding, one polished and powerful, the other raw and humble, both realizing that love doesn't follow rules, titles, or expectations. It finds you where you least expect it. Months later, Mason walked through the same restaurant doors again, this time in a new suit, holding Zoe's hand. The hostess smiled. "M. Sinclair is waiting for you." Ava stood near the same window, her eyes lighting up when she saw them. Mason kneeled before her, took her hand, and said quietly, "I never believed in miracles, but somehow you became mine." Ava smiled, tears glimmering. "Then let's spend the rest of our lives believing together." As Zoe clapped happily and the world around them blurred into soft music and sunlight, Mason knew that sometimes love doesn't knock. It walks in wearing a borrowed suit on the wrong night and changes everything. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Every click helps us spread more hope, faith, and second chances in a world that desperately needs them. Special request: comment below. I still believe in unexpected love if you think everyone deserves a second chance at happiness. Because sometimes, all it takes is one dinner, one stranger, and one moment of courage to find forever.